What's up everyone, Emerald here from Emerald's Daily Carry, and today we're going to be diving into a super nerdy yet fascinating topic, how we measure the volume of our bags we test. This might seem like an oddly specific thing to talk about, but trust me, if you're into bags and carry gear, you're going to want to stick around for this one. As we continue to test more bags in the future, our measuring methods might change, and if they do, we'll make sure to update you with a new video explaining what we've changed and why. But for now, I want to share how we currently measure volume, why we even bother, and what it tells us about the bag industry as a whole. If you've ever wondered why we dump pinto beans into our bags, or why no one seems to agree on how big 20 liters actually is, you're in the right place. If you're not into any of this nerdy stuff, that's totally fine. Thank you so much for stopping by. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and slap that notification bell on your way out. And for the rest of you, you better buckle up because we're about to get real nerdy. So let's rewind a little bit and talk about how this whole obsession with measuring volume even started. A while ago, I was on the hunt for a new backpack on my commute, and I was carrying more than the typical everyday carry loadout. Think like laptop, gym clothes, a bunch of extras. Like any reasonable person, I turned into YouTube reviews to help me figure out what bag suits my needs. And most of the reviews that I watched included pack-out sections where reviewers would fill the bag with items to show you what they could realistically fit. And at first I thought, okay, well this is helpful. But the more I watched, the more I realized something was missing. The pack-out gave me a rough idea of what might fit, but it didn't actually tell me what the real volume of the bag was. And then there were always vague comments reviewers would make, something like, you know, this is a little bit smaller than the listed liters, or this bag might actually hold 2 or 4 more liters than advertised. And I always couldn't help but think, well, what is it, 2 or 4? I started to realize that I didn't even have a super clear picture of what 20 liters versus 22 liters really look like in practical terms, and it didn't help that some of these bags didn't seem to match up to their listed volume. And I just kept thinking to myself, like, why is this so hard? Why isn't the listed volume just the same as the actual volume of the bag? Shouldn't this just be standard information? And it just sent me spiraling down a rabbit hole of questions like, how do we even measure volume? Why do brands seem to fudge these numbers? And why does no one talk about this? Like, the more I thought about it, the more I realized how important it is to actually know what the real true volume of a bag is. If you're spending money on something that's supposed to carry your daily essentials or even your travel gear, you want to know that it'll actually fit everything that you need. For me, this whole volume measuring obsession started with that one problem, but then it eventually expanded into a very bigger critique on the whole carry industry. Here's where it gets kind of interesting. The types of bags that we talk about on this channel occupy a very unique space in the market. They're not cheap by any means, they're not throwaway bags that you find at the dollar store that you barely use for a year, and they're not that total luxury designer bag like a Chanel or a Birkin bag that has a lot more to do with status than the function of the bag. The bags that we talk about kind of sit somewhere in the middle. They're really functional, often designed with premium materials for durability, and typically range anywhere from $150 to $400+. And at that price point, you're really making an investment. You want to make sure that the bag is well made, that it fits your gear, and then ideally lasts for years. But even at that level, you're not going to get guaranteed great customer service experiences. Most brands in this space still make returns, exchanges, and warranties a little bit more complicated than they need to be, and this problem isn't unique to bags. Clothing and footwear have very similar issues when it comes to sizing. What fits perfectly on one brand might not fit at all in another brand, but here's the key difference. With shoes or clothes, you can usually try them on in store or order multiple sizes online, then return what doesn't fit. But bags are a little bit trickier. You can't really know if the bag is gonna work for you unless you've used it in your daily life. You need to test out the pocket layout functions. How comfortable is it to wear for hours, and whether it accommodates all your different loadouts. But if you do that, you're likely voided the return policy, which usually requires the bag to be in brand new condition with tags attached. And on top of that, most of these brands don't have significant retail presence, so you're forced to buy based on photos and videos you see online. And let's be honest, not everyone can afford to order 3 or 4 bags just to test them, especially if you're also paying for the return shipping for the ones that you send back. And for larger bags, that shipping cost alone can be significant. So as a consumer, you're kind of often left gambling. Either you commit to a bag and you hope that it's perfect, or you deal with the hassle of reselling it on the secondhand market if it's not perfect. And this is where I started to notice a really deep pattern. Manufacturers often use volume as a marketing tool. People tend to associate certain volumes with specific use cases. For example, when you hear 16 liters, you might think of an everyday carry kind of bag for work or for school. A 30-liter bag is kind of, on the other hand, might make you think of a travel bag or a larger weekend carry. And these volume categories shape how people perceive a bag's purpose. But here's the problem. The listed volume might not actually be accurate. Brands know that consumers have these mental associations, so they often design their bags to fit into certain categories, even if the actual capacity doesn't line up perfectly. Two bags labeled as 30 liters might hold completely different amounts because there is no standardized method for measuring volume that everyone follows. And honestly, there isn't a huge demand from customers to change this. Most people just trust the brand's claims or rely on the bag's dimensions to decide on if it will work for them. And without consumer pressure, there is really little incentive for brands to adopt stricter measuring standards. And that's why knowing the actual volume of the bag is so important. It's one of the biggest deciding factors when people choose a bag. If I had accurate volume measurements, it would be really easy for me to figure out if a bag meets my standards, which would reduce returns and lead to better purchasing decisions. Ultimately, that's not where the industry is right now, and you might be wondering, well, isn't there some kind of universal test that we could use to solve this problem? And yeah, there is. It's actually called the standard test method of measuring backpack capacity. The test involves filling a bag with small, incompressible spheres like plastic balls, and then measuring their total volume. And that gives you the uncompressed volume of the bag, which is kind of what we do with our pinto beans. But there's still some inaccuracy because of all of the air gaps in between those spheres. So to fix that, the test actually uses a piston to compress the spheres, eliminating those gaps. And that gives you the compressed volume of the bag, which is a much more accurate representation of the bag's usable space. Now, this test isn't perfect. It assumes that people pack in the most efficient way possible, which we all know is really rarely the case. In reality, you're going to be dealing with oddly shaped items that create even larger air gaps than these spheres would. And the test doesn't account for external features like water bottle pockets or straps for attaching gear. Plus, performing this test requires really specialized equipment and resources, and many brands either just don't have that or aren't willing to prioritize it, which sounds like maybe we've reached an impasse. If no one is asking for standardized volume measurement, and even the standard itself has its flaws, then maybe we're just back to square one where length times width times height is just the way to go. Even though this standard assumes an idealized scenario that can only be replicated in a lab and in no way is accurate to the real world and its use case, there are a lot of benefits to using a standard. The biggest advantage of it is that it gives us a standardized, repeatable way to measure volume. This allows for direct comparisons between bags, even if they're from different brands or designed from different purposes. Without a controlled test like this, manufacturers are free to measure volume however they want, which can lead to inflated claims or wildly inaccurate numbers. The piston test might not reflect real-world packing exactly, but it at least creates a baseline, which is an objective starting point for evaluating a bag's maximum storage capacity. That's something that the industry desperately needs. So where does that leave us? Well, for now, we use our pinto beans. They're relatively uniform in shape, they're clean, they're easy to handle. By filling the bag with beans, we can get a rough estimate of its uncompressed volume. It's not going to be as precise as the piston test, but it's the best that we can do with the tools that we have. Just keep in mind that even this measurement isn't perfect. The beans leave small air gaps, and the way that you pack your own items will probably create even more gaps. Still, we believe that providing you with at least an approximate volume is better than nothing, and it's one more piece of information to help you try to make an informed decision, especially when returns are such a hassle. The only way that this situation will improve is if consumers demand more transparency from brands, implementation of a universal standard, or push for better return policies. Until then, you're gonna be stuck with me and my beans. Whew, well, that was a lot. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever struggled with this bag sizing conundrum, or am I just a crazy bag nerd? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and share this video with anyone who might also find it interesting. Until next time, my name is Emerald from Emerald's Daily Carry. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace.